He pulled her over because he thought her car was too nice for her, but the second she stepped out, everything changed. The flashing blue lights came out of nowhere. 1 second, Colonel Denise Walker was humming along to an old sod song on the radio. The next, she saw those lights swirling in her rearview mirror. Her hands froze on the steering wheel for a split second before she slowly guided her Tesla to the side of the road. It was 5:42 p.m. on a warm Friday in Carmel, Indiana, and the sun hung low, painting everything in gold. She'd just finished a long day at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, headed home to meet her daughter for dinner. Her uniform jacket was neatly folded on the passenger seat, but her ID tag still gleamed faintly against her chest. Denise glanced at her side mirror. The patrol car sat a few feet behind her, lights still spinning, painting the white lines of the road in red and blue. Her heartbeat quickened. Not fear, she'd faced far worse in the service, but that quiet mix of frustration and disbelief that came every time she found herself in this situation. She knew exactly what was about to happen, even before the officer stepped out. "Come on," she muttered to herself, resting her hands on the steering wheel. "Not today." The officer approached, tall, late 30s maybe, pale skin, tight jawline, posture straight, like he wanted to prove something. His name tag read M. Daniels. His hand hovered near his belt, not quite resting on his holster, but close enough to send a message. He tapped the window twice. "License and registration." Denise pressed the button, lowering the glass halfway. Her voice came out calm, deliberate. "Good afternoon, officer. May I ask what this is about?" He tilted his head slightly. "You were driving kind of slow back there. Everything all right?" "Everything's fine," she said evenly. "Just following the speed limit." He glanced at her car, clean, new, and gleaming like it had rolled straight out of the showroom. Then his eyes returned to her face, scanning, calculating. "This your vehicle, ma'am?" Denise caught the subtle tone under the question. Not curiosity, suspicion. "Yes, it's registered in my name." He didn't hide the doubt in his eyes. "Mind just showing me the paperwork?" She handed over her license and registration, her movements slow and deliberate. Every motion felt like it was under surveillance. He took the documents, stepped back, and examined them longer than necessary. "Nice car," he said. "Model S, right? Must have set you back a lot." Denise didn't flinch. "I work hard, officer." He gave a dry chuckle. "Sure, just doesn't look like the kind of car I usually see around here, that's all." That line hit like a slap. Not because it was loud, but because of what it implied. Denise had heard variations of it her entire adult life. She looked up at him, eyes steady. "And what kind of car is that exactly?" He hesitated, clearly caught off guard by her question. "I just meant, it's a nice car. That's all." She nodded slowly. "I get that a lot." The silence stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable. He shifted his weight, cleared his throat, and muttered, "Wait here," before walking back to his patrol car. Through the side mirror, Denise watched him sit there, typing something into his computer, glancing at her, then back to the screen. She could almost guess what he was doing, running plates, checking her record, maybe even double-checking the registration again. Inside her car, she exhaled a long, slow breath. She'd been pulled over before, too many times to count, and each one played out the same way. But today felt different. Maybe it was because she was in uniform. Maybe because she'd just spent 12 hours handling logistics for an upcoming deployment. Maybe because she was simply tired of having to prove who she was. A notification blinked on her dashboard, her daughter's text. "You on your way, Mom?" She typed back quickly. "Got stopped by police. Be there soon." As she hit send, she caught sight of Officer Daniels stepping out of his cruiser again, this time with a more focused expression. "Here we go," she whispered. He approached her window again, paperwork still in hand. "Ma'am, I ran your license. Everything checks out, but could you step out of the vehicle for a moment?" Her brow furrowed. "Step out? For what reason?" "Routine check," he said quickly. "We've had reports of similar vehicles involved in suspicious activity around the area. Just want to make sure everything's in order." Denise stared at him for a long second, her disbelief simmering beneath a calm surface. "Suspicious activity?" "Yes, ma'am." Her voice lowered, sharper now. "You stopped me because you think I stole my own car?" He stiffened. "I didn't say that." You didn't have to. For a moment, neither moved. The sound of a passing truck broke the stillness. Denise could feel every ounce of tension pressing against her chest, but she stayed composed. She'd handled interrogations before, only this time, the battlefield was an empty suburban street. Finally, she spoke. "All right, officer. You want me to step out?" "Fine." Her seatbelt clicked. The door opened. But what Officer Daniels saw next would silence every assumption he had made in the last 10 minutes. But he wasn't ready for the truth that walked out of that Tesla. The door of the Tesla swung open, and Denise stepped out, slow and steady. The late sun glinted off the metal insignia on her shoulder, the silver eagle of a full colonel. The light caught the ribbons across her chest, neat and proud, each one telling a story most people would never hear. For a moment, Officer Mark Daniels just stood there. His hand, still hovering near his belt, faltered slightly. His voice came out uneven. You're military?" Denise straightened her posture, the authority in her tone unmistakable. "Yes, I am. Colonel Denise Walker, United States Air Force." Her words hung in the air like a gavel striking a table. Daniels blinked, unsure how to process what he was seeing. She was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes from years of leading under pressure, making calls that could decide lives. He started, clearing his throat. "Mind if I ask where you're headed?" "Home," she said simply. "Unless that's illegal now, too." He flinched slightly at the edge in her voice. "No, ma'am, that's not... He gestured vaguely toward the car. "It's not every day I pull over someone like you. I didn't realize..." "That's the point," she interrupted. "You didn't realize. You saw a black woman in a nice car and made an assumption." The air felt heavier. Even the traffic noise from the nearby intersection seemed to fade. Daniels's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. "Look, ma'am, I was just doing my job. There have been some reports in this area, and your car happened to match the..." She took a small step forward, eyes fixed on him. "You want to be honest with me, officer? Because right now, it sounds like you're trying to make what you did sound reasonable." He opened his mouth, then closed it. He wasn't used to being challenged like this, especially not by someone who outranked him in every way that mattered. Denise didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The quiet conviction behind each word did the work for her. "I've served this country for 24 years. I've buried friends who didn't make it home. I've seen people of every race, every background, give everything for a flag that doesn't always love them back. And still, here I am, pulled over because someone thought I looked out of place." Daniel stared at her, guilt beginning to creep into his eyes. "That's not what I meant." "Maybe not. But it's what you did." He rubbed the back of his neck, his confidence fading. "I'm sorry, ma'am. It's protocol." "Protocol doesn't ask for color," she said quietly. "It asks for cause." "Do you have one?" He hesitated. "Not anymore." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. A breeze rustled the leaves above them, carrying with it the faint scent of cut grass and exhaust. Somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower buzzed. Denise let out a small sigh. "Officer Daniels, what you did just now, that's exactly the kind of thing that keeps happening to people like me. People who've done everything right, people who work hard, follow the law, and still end up standing on the side of the road, being asked to prove they belong." Her voice softened slightly. "You think I don't get nervous every time I see those flashing lights? You think I don't run through the same checklist? Hands visible, voice steady, no sudden moves, just so I make it home safe?" Daniel's face fell. "I didn't think about that." "That's the problem," she said simply. "You didn't think." He looked down, embarrassed, eyes tracing the cracks in the asphalt. "You're right." The words came out quietly, almost as if he was admitting them to himself more than to her. Denise studied him for a moment, really studied him. There was something in his expression now, something that looked almost human. The kind of regret that comes when a person finally sees themselves from the outside. "Look," he said after a pause, "I didn't mean to disrespect you. Or anyone. I was trying to do my job." "And I respect that," she replied. "But doing your job doesn't mean forgetting your judgment. Or your humanity." He nodded, still unable to meet her eyes. "You're right, ma'am." There was a long silence, the kind that fills the space between two people standing at a crossroads, one ashamed, the other exhausted. Denise turned slightly toward her car, then stopped. "Officer Daniels, let me ask you something." He looked up. "Yes, ma'am." "When you first saw me, what did you see?" He hesitated. "I saw someone driving a car that didn't seem to fit." She tilted her head slightly. "And now?" He swallowed. "Now I see someone I should have respected from the start." Her gaze softened just enough for him to notice. "Good. Because the uniform doesn't give me worth. My work does. My life does. The same goes for everyone else you meet out here." He nodded again, slower this time, as if the weight of her words was finally sinking in. But what neither of them knew was that the conversation was far from over, because the real test of respect was coming next. For a few seconds, everything felt still. Cars passed by in the distance, but neither Denise nor Officer Daniels moved. She stood tall, the late light catching the edge of her silver insignia, while he shifted his stance, trying to hold on to what little confidence he had left. He cleared his throat again. "Ma'am, I didn't mean to—" She cut him off gently. "Officer Daniels, relax. You don't have to explain it anymore." There was no anger in her tone now, just fatigue. The kind of fatigue that comes from carrying the same conversation for years, over and over again, with different faces wearing the same expression. She took a step closer, close enough for him to see the lines near her eyes. The quiet evidence of years in service, years of discipline, responsibility, and leadership. "You said you wanted to make sure everything was in order," she said. "Well, it is. Everything about me is in order." He nodded awkwardly, his eyes darting toward her uniform. "I can see that now." "Good," she said. Then, after a brief pause, she added, "I'm curious, though. What were you going to do if I didn't step out of the car?" The question caught him off guard. "Excuse me?" "If I'd said no," she pressed, "if I'd refused to step out, what would have happened next?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I would have, probably called for backup." Denise folded her arms. "Backup? For what?" He shifted his weight, the answer catching in his throat. "Just procedure, she repeated softly. That word gets used a lot when people don't want to admit they made a bad call. Daniels looked down at the pavement again, his reflection faintly visible in the glossy side of her car. "I guess I deserve that." "You do," she said. "But what you do with it next, that's what matters." For the first time, his expression shifted from defensive to reflective. "You're right, ma'am. I've been with the department 8 years, and sometimes you start seeing things through patterns, not people." Denise's voice softened, just slightly. "And those patterns can get people hurt. Or worse." He nodded, his gaze distant. "Yeah." For a long moment, there was only the hum of the road between them. Daniels's hand finally dropped completely away from his belt, a small gesture of surrender. Denise studied him for a moment, then turned back toward her Tesla. "I think we're done here, officer." He blinked. "You're not going to file a complaint?" She let out a quiet laugh, the kind that carried more sadness than humor. "No, complaints don't fix attitudes. Conversations do." Daniels exhaled slowly, almost in relief. "I appreciate that, ma'am." "Don't thank me," she said, sliding back toward her car. "Just do better next time. For whoever's in that driver's seat." As she reached for the door handle, Daniels took a small step forward. "Colonel Walker," he called out. She turned. "Yes?" He hesitated. "Can I ask you something personal?" She gave a cautious nod. "Depends on what it is." "What made you join the military?" he asked quietly. Denise tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing as if weighing the honesty behind the question. "I joined because I wanted to serve something bigger than myself. My father was a mechanic. My mother was a teacher. Both believed in discipline and purpose. I figured the Air Force was the best place to live those values." Daniels nodded. "I respect that." "I'd hope so," she said, her tone dry but not unkind. "But you know what's funny? After all these years of service, after all the medals, the deployments, the commendations, it's not the missions I remember the most. It's moments like this." He frowned slightly. "Like this?" She gestured around them. The empty road, the flashing lights, the space between them. Moments when I have to remind someone that I'm more than what they assumed I was. Her voice softened even further. You think being an officer means you've seen the world clearly, but bias wears a lot of uniforms, Officer Daniels. Some have stripes, some have badges. He didn't know what to say to that. He stood there, silent, the weight of her words settling deep. Finally, she opened her car door. I'm heading home. You have a good evening? Daniels nodded, his voice low. You too, ma'am. As she slid into her seat, he watched her start the car. The Tesla pulled forward, smooth and silent, the taillights glowing red against the dimming road. But just before she disappeared around the corner, she slowed down and rolled down her window. Officer Daniels, she called. He turned. She gave a faint smile. Next time you pull someone over, try seeing who they are before deciding what they're not. Then she drove off, leaving him standing there, motionless. He stood in the cooling air, the sound of her engine fading into the distance, his reflection caught in the glint of his patrol car's lights. But even as she drove away, neither of them realized that this single encounter would follow them both, changing how they saw the world and themselves in ways neither expected. Officer Daniels stood on the roadside long after Denise's car had vanished down the stretch of asphalt. The lights on his cruiser flickered faintly against the fading sky before he finally reached in and turned them off. What was left was silence. Heavy, uneasy silence. He leaned against the front of his car, running a hand over his face. The cool air felt sharper now, almost cleansing. He didn't even know what to feel. Guilt, embarrassment, or just shame that it had taken this moment to wake him up. Inside the Tesla, Denise drove with the same quiet intensity. Her fingers gripped the wheel, steady but tight. She replayed the entire scene in her mind. The stop, the questions, the way he looked at her before he saw the uniform. The sting of it wasn't new, but it never dulled. A voice message from her daughter, Kayla, popped up on the dashboard. Hey mom, just checking if you're okay. Dinner's ready, but I can warm it up. Denise smiled faintly and hit the voice reply. I'm fine, baby. Just running a little late. Save me some chicken. She ended the message and exhaled. Her reflection in the glass looked tired. Not physically, but in a deeper way. The kind of fatigue that came from years of proving, performing, and persevering. As the car glided through the winding streets, she caught sight of a neighbor walking his dog. He waved politely. She waved back, her face neutral. People saw her as successful, put together, even lucky, but they didn't see what came with it. The small battles fought daily just to be seen as normal. Meanwhile, back on the roadside, Daniels climbed into his cruiser. He sat there for a while before turning on his body cam footage. The scene played on the small screen. His own voice, curt and skeptical, hers calm and measured. He watched the moment she stepped out in her uniform. His stomach twisted. He had the sudden, uncomfortable realization that if she hadn't worn it, if she'd been dressed in jeans and a hoodie instead, the encounter could have gone very differently. He paused the footage and stared at his own reflection in the screen. What are you doing, Mark? He muttered. When did you start seeing threats instead of people? He closed his eyes. Images flashed. Other stops, other faces, other moments that suddenly didn't feel as clear-cut as he once thought. He'd told himself he was just doing his job, but was he? Or was he just doing what was easy, what was expected? His radio crackled to life. Unit 4-17, report in. Everything clear? He hesitated before answering. Yeah, he said finally. Clear. But nothing about how he felt was clear. The next morning, Denise sat at her kitchen table, a mug of coffee in hand. Kayla, still in her pajamas, was scrolling through her phone. You look tired, the teenager said. Long day yesterday, Denise replied softly. Kayla looked up. Everything okay? You texted me about getting stopped. Denise nodded slowly. It's fine now. Just another misunderstanding. Kayla frowned. You mean another one of those stops? Denise hesitated. Yeah, one of those, why does it keep happening? Kayla asked quietly. You didn't do anything wrong. Denise stared into her coffee for a moment. Because sometimes, baby, people don't see you for who you are. They see what they expect to see. The rest, they fill in on their own. Kayla tilted her head. So what do you do? I keep showing up, Denise said. Every day. Because if I stop, they win. Kayla smiled faintly. That sounds like something Grandpa would have said. Denise chuckled. Yeah, he probably would have. At that same hour, Daniels was at the precinct, sitting at his desk. The station buzzed around him, phones ringing, printers spitting out reports, officers coming and going, but his mind wasn't in the room. He opened his laptop and pulled up the incident report he'd filed the night before. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. The standard summary was there. Traffic stop conducted, no violation found. Driver released without citation. But that didn't feel right. Not anymore. He clicked into the remarks section and started typing. Stopped a driver matching description of vehicle and local report. Driver identified as Colonel Denise Walker, U.S. Air Force. Interaction prompted reflection on personal conduct and decision-making during traffic stops. Recommend bias training review for department. He paused, reading it over. It wasn't much. It wouldn't undo what had happened, but it was something. A start. The captain walked by, glanced at his screen, and raised an eyebrow. You're being a little too honest there, Daniels. Daniels looked up, his tone quiet but firm. Maybe that's what we've been missing, sir. The captain studied him for a second, then shrugged. Suit yourself. As the door closed behind him, Daniels leaned back in his chair. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel defensive, just aware. Back at home, Denise glanced out the window, watching a group of kids ride their bikes down the street, laughing freely. Her gaze softened. Maybe the world was changing, slowly. Maybe not fast enough. But one conversation, one moment, could make a difference. But the next time their paths crossed, neither of them expected it to happen under such different circumstances, or to change everything again. 2 weeks later, a humid afternoon hung over Carmel like a blanket. The air was thick, the sky gray with the threat of rain. Denise parked her Tesla in front of the Hamilton County Veterans Center, straightening the small pin on her lapel before stepping out. She had been invited to speak at a community outreach meeting, one focused on strengthening trust between civilians, veterans, and local law enforcement. Inside, the crowd was mixed, veterans in faded uniforms, officers in pressed blues, and a few townspeople sitting quietly in the back rows. A local news crew was setting up near the side wall, their camera lights cutting across the room. Denise scanned the audience and froze for half a second. Sitting in the third row, arms crossed and expression guarded, was Officer Mark Daniels. Their eyes met. He gave a small, hesitant nod. Denise didn't return it. Not yet. The moderator stepped up to the mic. We're honored to have Colonel Denise Walker with us today. She served this country for over 2 decades and continues to advocate for community accountability and fair treatment for all citizens. Polite applause filled the room. Denise approached the podium, her steps measured. She took a moment before speaking, scanning faces. Some familiar, others skeptical. Good afternoon, she began, her voice firm but calm. I've been asked to talk about service, integrity, and what those words mean beyond the uniform. She paused, letting her words settle. I believe real service doesn't stop when you take the uniform off. It continues in how you treat people, how you see them. Because what we do in our positions, whether it's the military or law enforcement, shapes how people trust us or fear us. Daniels shifted in his seat. She could see it, that flicker of discomfort. I had an experience recently, she continued, that reminded me how fragile that trust can be. I was pulled over for what was called a routine stop. But there was nothing routine about being questioned about a car I worked years to afford. There was nothing routine about realizing that in someone else's eyes, I looked suspicious before I even said a word. Murmurs rippled through the room. Daniels lowered his gaze. Denise leaned slightly on the podium, her tone softening. The truth is, that officer didn't see me as a person at first. He saw an idea, a stereotype. But when I stepped out of that car and he saw this uniform, suddenly everything changed. Respect appeared, but it shouldn't have taken rank or medals to earn it. A hush fell over the room. Even the camera crew paused. Respect should be the starting point, she said, not the reward. She looked directly at Daniels now. Her voice didn't waver. And to the officer who pulled me over that day, I want to say something. I don't hate you. I don't even hold a grudge, because I've learned that some lessons are only learned the hard way. But I do expect better from you. From all of you. The room went silent. Daniels shifted again, clearly wrestling with whether to speak. Then, almost impulsively, he stood. "Colonel Walker," he said, his voice louder than he intended. "That was me." Gasps and whispers swept through the audience. Denise didn't flinch. Daniels's hands trembled slightly as he spoke. "She's right. I pulled her over. I made a call based on what I thought I saw, and I was wrong." The moderator glanced nervously between them but didn't intervene. Daniels turned toward the audience. "I've been a cop for 8 years. I've made a lot of traffic stops, but that one..." He pointed toward her, voice cracking slightly. "That one made me realize I've been seeing people through filters I didn't even know I had." He swallowed hard. "I went home that night embarrassed. I kept thinking, what if she wasn't a colonel? What if she'd just been someone else? Someone without a title or a platform? Would I have listened the same way? Probably not. And that's the part that scares me." No one spoke. Even the sound of the air conditioning felt too loud. Denise slowly stepped away from the podium. "Officer Daniels," she said evenly, "it takes courage to admit when you're wrong. But courage means nothing if it doesn't lead to change." He nodded. "I know. That's why I've been pushing for new training at the department. Real training. Not the kind you just sign off on." I brought up your stop in my report. A few officers in the room turned toward him, surprised. Denise studied him closely. "You didn't have to do that." "I did," he said. "Because if I didn't, I'd still be the same guy who saw a threat instead of a woman going home from work." For the first time, a trace of a smile crossed Denise's face, faint but genuine. "Maybe you've learned something after all." He met her gaze. "I'm still learning." She took a slow step forward, closing the distance between them. "Then maybe there's hope for this world yet." The moderator, sensing the emotional current, quickly stepped back to the microphone. "That was powerful. Thank you both." Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then building stronger as the tension dissolved. A few people stood, others wiped at their eyes. Daniels exhaled, visibly relieved. Denise glanced around the room, her eyes softening. For once, it felt like maybe, just maybe, something had shifted. Not just between her and Daniels, but in the space that existed between them and everyone watching. But growth doesn't end in a meeting room. It gets tested in the real world, and both of them were about to find that out. The sky outside the Veterans Center had opened up by the time the meeting ended. Rain poured steadily, blurring the parking lot in sheets of silver. Denise stood beneath the small awning by the doors, watching the downpour while the crowd slowly filtered out behind her. Some stopped to shake her hand, others simply nodded respectfully before hurrying to their cars. Then she saw Daniels again. He was standing by his cruiser, staring down at his phone, drenched but unmoving. Something about the sight made her hesitate. Not out of pity, but recognition. She knew that look, the weight of self-reflection, the kind that didn't leave you alone when the applause stopped. She stepped into the rain without a second thought. "You planning on standing there all night, officer?" He looked up, startled, rain running down his face. "Didn't expect you to come out here." "I didn't expect you to stand in the rain," she replied, almost teasingly. "You trying to prove a point?" Daniels chuckled under his breath. "Maybe. Or maybe I just needed a minute to think." Denise crossed her arms. "And what are you thinking about?" He hesitated. "That I've been wearing this badge for nearly a decade, and today was the first time I actually heard what people like you have been trying to say." Her expression softened slightly. "It's not easy to listen when you think you already understand." "Yeah," he said, "and I realize now that most of us don't understand anything until it gets personal, until we're the ones who have to look someone in the eye after screwing up." The rain kept falling, drumming against the hoods of their cars. Denise tilted her head slightly. "What made you speak up in there?" He gave a small shrug. "Guilt, maybe. But also, I figured silence was just another way of hiding, and I've done enough of that." She nodded slowly. "That's a start." They stood in silence for a few seconds, the rain washing away any trace of the tension that once sat between them. Finally, Daniels broke it. "You know, my mom used to tell me something. She'd say, if you're going to wear something that means authority, make sure your character can carry the weight of it." Took me a while to understand that. Denise smiled faintly. "Sounds like she raised you right." "You just lost your way a bit." He smirked. "Guess so." She turned toward her car, but before opening the door, she looked back. You ever think about why people react so differently to a uniform? Daniels frowned. What do you mean? Because a uniform can either build trust or fear, she said. Depends on who's wearing it and how they treat people while they do. The power isn't in the fabric. It's in how you make people feel when they see it. He nodded, thoughtful. You ever think it's too late to change how people see us? Denise shook her head. It's never too late to change how you see them. The rest follows. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he just looked out at the street. The way the rain reflected the stoplights, red bleeding into green, green into yellow. You know, he said quietly, I used to think my job was about catching the bad guys. Now I think it's about not becoming one. Denise studied him for a moment. That's a good start, Officer Daniels. Keep that thought close. He gave a half smile. You ever think we'd end up on the same side of anything? She laughed softly. Didn't think we'd end up talking in the rain, that's for sure. For a few seconds, they both laughed. Not because the situation was funny, but because it was human. Because life had a strange way of forcing lessons through the cracks of discomfort. Finally, Denise opened her car door. Take care of yourself, officer. And next time you stop someone, maybe ask for their license after you see their humanity. He nodded firmly. Yes, ma'am. As she drove off, Daniel stood there for another minute, watching her taillights fade into the blur of rain. The steady rhythm of the storm seemed to echo what was happening inside him. Something cleansing, something uncomfortable but necessary. He walked around to the driver's side of his cruiser and sat inside, dripping water onto the seat. He reached for the radio but stopped halfway. Instead, he sat in the stillness, letting the rain tap against the windshield. He pulled out a small notepad from his pocket and started writing something down. Remember faces. Not profiles. Ask questions. Don't assume answers. Respect first. Authority second. He tore the page from the pad and stuck it on his dashboard. Then he started the engine. Back home, Denise placed her uniform jacket neatly on the chair beside her desk. She stared at it for a while. The metals, the stitching, the weight it carried. Then she picked up a framed photo of her father in his own uniform from decades ago. You were right, Dad, she whispered. The fight never really ends. It just changes uniforms. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. She smiled faintly and turned off the lamp. But while both of them had found some peace that night, the lesson of their encounter wasn't meant to stay between two people. It was meant to ripple outward, challenging everyone who'd ever made an assumption before, offering respect. A week later, the story found its way online. Someone at the Veterans Center had uploaded a short clip from the meeting, the moment when Denise stood at the podium and Daniels admitted his mistake. The clip spread fast. People shared it not because it was flashy, but because it felt real. Two people, one in a colonel's uniform, the other in a police badge, standing in the same room, owning their truth without yelling, without theatrics. Just honesty. Comments poured in beneath the video. Some praised Denise for her composure and strength. Others called Daniels brave for admitting his bias in public. A few were cynical, saying it wouldn't change anything. But most saw something hopeful. A moment of raw humanity in a world that often forgets what that looks like. Denise didn't read all the comments. She didn't need to. The story wasn't about going viral. It was about being seen. About the countless stops and stories that didn't make it online. And the people who never got to explain themselves before things went wrong. One afternoon, as she walked through a grocery store parking lot, a middle-aged woman approached her. "Excuse me," she said, smiling nervously. "You're Colonel Walker, right? I saw your video." Denise smiled politely. "That's me." The woman nodded. "I just wanted to say thank you. My son's 16. He got stopped last year for looking suspicious walking home from practice. It shook him up bad. Watching you stand there, calm and proud, it reminded me that dignity can still win." Denise's smile softened. "That means a lot. Tell your son to keep his head high. The world may not always be fair, but we can't let it change who we are." The woman nodded, her eyes glistening. "I will." As Denise loaded her groceries into her car, she glanced at the reflection in the window. Her own face looking back, tired but peaceful. She whispered to herself, "One step at a time." Meanwhile, at the police precinct, Officer Daniels stood before a small group of recruits in a training room. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above them. He looked at the young faces, some eager, some cocky, all of them still untouched by the weight of real experience. He held up a photo, a still from the viral video showing him and Denise standing face to face. "You all saw this clip?" A few nodded. Daniels took a breath. "That's me. I was the one who pulled her over, and that day, I learned more about being a cop than in any academy classroom." He leaned against the podium. "Let me tell you what no policy book will. You're going to meet all kinds of people. Some will lie to you, some will hate you, some will need your help. But if you walk into every situation with judgment first, you'll never see the truth of who's in front of you." He looked at the recruits, letting the words sink in. That woman, Colonel Walker, she could have reported me. She could have dragged my name through the mud, but she didn't. She chose conversation over confrontation, and because of that, I learned something about humility. One of the younger officers raised a hand. "Sir, do you think people can really change?" Daniels thought for a moment. Only if they want to, and only if they're willing to listen when they're uncomfortable. The room fell silent. He took a deep breath, remembering her words that day in the rain. Respect first, authority second. He looked up at his trainees again. "You want to be good cops? Start there." After the session ended, he walked out of the building and stood in the sunlight. For the first time in a while, he felt something he hadn't before. Not pride, not guilt, but peace. He couldn't undo what happened, but he could make sure it counted for something. Later that evening, Denise sat at her dining table, her daughter Kayla across from her, working on a school project. Kayla looked up. "Mom, my teacher showed your video today. Everyone was talking about it." Denise smiled gently. "Oh yeah. What did they say?" "They said it made them think." One kid said his dad's a cop, and they watched it together. He said his dad cried. Denise paused, her eyes softening. "Good. Maybe that means it's working." Kayla nodded. "Do you think people will ever stop judging others?" Denise leaned back, her voice quiet but sure. "Maybe not completely. But if even one person learns to think before they assume, to look before they judge, that's change. And change doesn't happen all at once. It happens moment by moment, one person at a time." Kayla smiled. "I like that." "Me too," Denise said, her tone warm. "Now finish your homework. Even soldiers need rest." Kayla laughed, and for a moment, the world inside their home felt calm. Outside, the sunset spilled through the blinds, casting long streaks of orange and gold across the floor, the same color the world had been that day on the side of the road. The difference now was simple. Both of them had seen each other clearly. Because sometimes, the real act of courage isn't wearing the uniform. It's learning to see the person beneath it. If this story moved you, take a moment to think before you judge someone. Ask yourself what story you're not seeing. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that respect shouldn't depend on a title, a color, or a uniform. It should be where every conversation begins.